Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Well, this week we're going to talk about these rather imposing speakers. These are the IMF Reference Standard Professional Monitor. It's a name about this long. This is also the Mark IV of the series. They had quite a number of model versions along the way. But the IMF monitor is kind of got a bit of a legendary status if you've not seen these speakers before. These were the top of the line. If you are interested in the history, which I won't go into much of, just high level, but if you're interested in the detailed history, the Absolute Sound did a great video of them a couple of years ago on their channel. And if you want to know more about IMF and their history, go out there and check out that video. I'll see if I can put a link into the this as well if you're looking for it and can't find it. But they do a great history of the overall discussion of IMF, how they came about, how these speakers came about, and it's quite an interesting story. But the IMF line is in the early days was considered was a type of speaker that you hear about but you don't see very often, and that's something called a transmission line speaker. Now, transmission line sounds like some kind of interesting connectivity of the drivers, but really it's the style of the chambers and how it's set up. And I'll put a reference of an explosion here from IMF themselves that they used to have in their brochures that explains what that is. And it's I guess it looks like a horn-driven speaker like we might see in like a Klipsch horn. However, it's different, of course, and it's more there's some precision into how they've set that up and the size of it. But they've also stuffed it all along the chamber with different types of stuffing, from wool to fiberglass and then foam. I think foam is the standard now and is what's in these speakers as well. But that foam and how the stuffing is put in place is very critical to the success of the transmission line speaker. So that is part of the reason that they are not so common as well. And again, the Absolute Sound discussion goes into depth on that. But it's a rather challenging speaker to build. And because of that, they become costly to build. And that's why you don't see them very often. But the company started in the early 70s, I think, or late 60s maybe, and did quite well, but they were just very, very expensive from the time frame. When you had other speakers that were lower cost, like the Advent, like Acoustic Research, etc., these were several times more expensive, and so you just don't see them that often. It's a rather rare speaker. This model was their top of the line. You can't imagine a speaker getting much bigger than this, but it was their top of the line, obviously, and it's a great sounding speaker. Let me take the cover off and give you a little bit more view of what's behind it here. All right, so here we go. This is the standard monitor speaker. Now, what you can right away see, and that's unique, is that Kef woofer that sort of differentiates it from everything else, and does seem a little oddly placed until you know that there's a chamber that is specifically built for putting it there and coming all the way through the cabinet and exiting in the ports down here. So that diagram sort of fully explains how that works and what transmission line is. So it is transmitting that energy all the way from the woofer through the cabinet and out the bottom ports there. So that's what a transmission line is. So one thing I wanted to point out that may not be obvious, it is out there, you can find it, but it is you can see that these are, well, you might not be able to tell, but these are actually mirrored. The configuration is mirrored for each one. And one thing to denote, if you're going to get a set and set them up, that you want the IMF logo to the center. You want your tweeter and mid-range drivers to the center of your sitting position. So this is the way they would be oriented if you were going to get a set and set them up. So just some heads up for you there. If you find a pair and you want to set them up and you come home and go, which way should they go? IMF logos to the middle. So just a pointer there. But great sounding speaker. Now I'll talk a little bit about how they sound. For me, and I don't have my other reference speakers I used to use for comparisons, but for me, well, I'm going to start at the low end. Usually I sort of work my way up. And the bass is what everyone wants to talk about with IMF transmission lines, the bass, the bass, the bass. Well, the bass is certainly there. It is a bit effortless. And you might think that it's going to sound kind of boomy, which ported speakers tend to sound a lot, sometimes, not always. When they're tuned just right, they don't get that boominess. But these to me sound closer to a sealed enclosure than they do a ported enclosure. So it's a very controlled, tight bass, which is my preference. I prefer that. And it doesn't sort of jump out at you. It's there and it's substantial and there's plenty of it. And you don't need a sub. It's all just fine, but it's just a little bit more laid back than you would get from, say, a ported speaker. It is a bit effortless. And by the way, it is coming from, this one driver, which is pretty amazing. So for me, it is a unique low end. And it's the kind of low end I actually prefer. Again, I like a sealed enclosure as my personal preference, and they lean in that direction despite the fact that they're actually ported. So I found that quite interesting on the uniqueness of transmission line. And so that's the one thing that I think makes them completely unique from everything else. When it gets into the mid-range, mid-range is from a soundstage, mid-range is in the center. It is up front, which is where you want it, and sounds natural. There is a great soundstage between them, and you can get into the high end, and there are two tweeters here, and it's not irritating at all. I wouldn't call them soft, but it has just enough crispness to be there, but not at all fatiguing. It's a very laid back, I'll say, high end that you can listen to all day. The one thing I will say is that if you want to sort of compare them to what I consider like critical speakers, and on average, electrostats tend to be in that category. So electrostats, from my experience, tend to be extremely critical. And so what I mean by that is that if you have, say, a lesser recording, it highlights it in a way that's irritating. Whereas these, and the majority of speakers really, are much more forgiving, and you don't get that sort of feeling that it's just a bad pairing of a recording and the speakers. These are extremely forgiving, and everything sounds very good on them. So from that aspect, it's a speaker you can live with for just about any genre. Unless you're just a person who likes that criticality for everything, and you'd rather go out and find a better recording. If you like that, then by all means, get that kind of system set up. But if you're somebody who likes to be varied in the type of genre and the type of recordings, and you just want to be able to play any of your music, I think these are much more accommodating for that. So that's how I would, describe them at a high level. Some other things to point out are the front face here is also veneered, which was again, it's a feature and it's a cost that they incurred. The backs are also veneered as well. So a gorgeous speaker that, and I'm a sucker for veneer, which I always say. And if you like that, then it's a gorgeous speaker. The stands were part of the package as well. They do have sort of a bevel around the bottom, and they fit right into their speaker stands. One thing I'll denote here is that if you're going to try and move them, and I got them by myself from a second floor, had to take them down the stairs. Plan ahead. One way to do that is to take a moving strap, take some padding as well, put a strap around the entire speaker and the stand, cinch it together fairly tight, and you've sort of bonded those two together for moving. If you're going to use a dolly, if you're by yourself, you have to. Then get yourself a hard foam. I use about a 3.5 inch thick foam square that I use, and I put it between my dolly and the bottom, and it gives it just enough space where you can then use a dolly to lift them up. If you don't do that, you're not going to be able to lift it with your dolly because it's just not going to have the space there needed to lift them off the ground. So you do those things, and you can move them by yourself. They are I think they're about 130 pounds or so. So unless you plan ahead or get help, you're going to have a little bit of a challenge trying to move them around. So that is, my quick overview of the IMF. The IMF Reference Standard Professional Monitor. Again, that name, I always have trouble remembering all of the words in the name here. But that's them. It has been a while since I've been able to get these out, since I got them, but wanted to make sure I covered them a bit in a video, as everything will be up for sale. These are included of that. So if you're interested, reach out, and I'll have them posted online shortly. So I guess that'll do it for the IMF Reference Standard Professional Monitor. If you guys want to reach out about them, please do. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.